This is going to be the first tour we have of 2017, and I'm very excited about it. I'm especially thrilled that Don Glaister is here and able to be the tour guide of this, because the book that he is focusing on is the book that I am getting as a surprise for my 80th birthday. So we are the first that will have a chance to see it in its magnificence and full glory.
So how many years are you waiting for it?
At least 10 years. Thank you so much. So here is the wonderful and brilliant Donald Glaster, and a book that will be a surprise to us all.
Thank you. No, that's what she calls me too, right? Thank you all for coming. I didn't know that this event existed somehow. So you guys are a lot hipper than I am. I made a one-off, a one-of-a-kind book a few years ago, based on the Voyager spacecrafts, which were launched by NASA in the 70s. And there were two of them launched a couple of days apart, and they're still there. They're still up there. The spacecrafts are still there, sending back information to us. And one of them, I don't know which one, is Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. I think it's Voyager 2, has left the solar system, left the influence of gravity, of the sun, and it's out there. And the other one is close behind. My wife, Suzanne, who's there, her brother Don was an engineer on the Voyager projects. And so we, Suzanne and I, went, we knew, obviously, I knew him. And he was a character, he was a great guy, and kind of he described himself as a Cloud9 engineer. And he didn't consider himself a space guy at all. He was just an engineer. Anyway, he and I had many long and kind of quirky, wonderful conversations about what he does and what I do, and basically after some time, we kind of decided that we both were doing the same thing, just from different directions. So, Don died in, I don't know, do you know 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And so I was looking around for a subject for a book, and this whole Voyager idea came up. And so I made a one-off book that, it was a huge book. It was about this tall. It weighed a lot. It was a huge thing. And it was huge also because he had not died all that long ago when I made the book. And so for our household, it was a big deal to make this book. I mean, I didn't know if I should make it. I didn't know if I should sell it. I didn't know if but I felt like I needed to do it somehow. So anyway, I did. I made it. And fortunately for us all, the Library of Congress bought it, and which was another weird thing because, do you sell something like that? It was so personal, and anyway, I'm glad they'd have it. But I decided that I needed, after a few years, I wanted to make I wasn't finished with the ideas that I had started in that book. And so I decided to revisit the whole Voyager idea. And in the first Voyager book, there was all of this space imagery, space-inspired imagery. And then there was Rumi poetry, 13th century mystic poet, together in this, because it seemed that way, it seemed fitting to me. So a couple of years ago, I started making these books. And they are Rumi poetry, space stuff, space-inspired imagery, and Walt Whitman excerpts from the Leaves of Grass. And they're all together in this book. And all three, it's called Three in Search of the Universe. And so the three of them, Rumi, Whitman, and Voyager spacecraft, are kind of out there, searching for the big answers. And maybe not even the big answers, maybe just trying to ask the big questions. So that's what this book is. So let's start with the book itself. I made so this is an edition. The first one, the one that the Library of Congress has, is just one book. This is an edition. I made 10 regular copies and 2 deluxe copies. And our hostess has one of the deluxe copies. And what the deluxe copy, the difference is, the books are the same, but there's 2 of them, and 2 boxes, and that's the archive. So there's drawings, sketches, little doodles, stuff like that, that kind of point to how come this book looks like it looks. So, I'm gonna show you the book, and then I'll show you the other stuff. So, as I said, there are 12 of these altogether. It's a leather binding, a leather spine, and painted and textured paper, metal on the. Let's see, I hope I can do this. And the pages are stiff, and some of them are metal. So this is aluminum with letterpress printing on the aluminum. Jessica Spring, our fearless collaborator in Tacoma, risked everything to print on metal here, and because letterpress presses are not made to do that. But she printed some of the original Voyager that had some metal pages, and so we knew that she could do it. But it was not my idea to do it in the first place, because it just never occurred to me. And Jessica, we were talking about it, and I was at her studio. We're going to get the Rumi page we were talking about, which I'll show you. And she said, I was going to have some metal there was some metal in the book already, not letterpressed. And she said, well, why don't we print this on metal? And I said, are you crazy? We can't do that. She said, really? Maybe we can. So we went to Home Depot and bought a roll of metal, of flashing for roofing. And we brought it back to her studio, and she had some piece of photopolymer, a photopolymer plate that she was willing to sacrifice to the cause. And it was just on her press, so we ran a piece of metal through it, and it worked. I mean, it was flexible enough to go around the drum, and it worked. So here we are. Okay. So this is, the type is letterpress. The metal is all sanded, and I did that before we printed on it. And then after we printed on it, I painted the color, so there's a little bit of black and some gold, kind of warmer color going on. And here's the Rumi page. And Rumi he apparently didn't write anything. He had people who would follow him around, and he would say interesting things, and they would write it down. And he kind of spoken, or at least it was recorded, sort of in couplets, kind of like Confucius, small little one-liners, two-liners. We have a president-elect who I think is doing it. I won't go there anymore, but I couldn't help it.
Rumi, the tweeter.
The tweeter, right. Yeah, this is just, right. He was just ahead of his time. Okay, so all of the metal that you see is treated the same way, and that is, I sanded it first with just by hand, a belt sander, and I got all these I kind of drew with the sander, and then it was printed. The type was printed, and then sprayed color over that, and there are other steps involved. I mean, sealing and lacquer, urethane and stuff to protect everything. But, so then there's a little break, there's a little, I don't know if you can see texture here. There's color texture, but there's also, it is textural. And then this starts. So this is some excerpts from Leaves of Grass. Maybe I shall read one or two of these. Yeah, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Unfortunately, I've not committed this to memory, so. There's some in here that I'm more that I like better than others, but this is a good one. I exist as I am, that is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest one to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today, or in 10,000 or 10 million years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness I can wait. That's pretty cool. The moth and the fish eggs are in their place. The suns I see and the suns I cannot see are in their place. The palpable is in its place, and the impalpable is in its place. So, pretty cool. When I had made the first Voyager book, I had not read The Leaves of Grass yet. And I was commissioned to do a Leaves of Grass in the meantime. And I was like, God, this is a thing here. I could do this. So this is board that's been painted and textured and then cut out and stuff put behind it. Plastic, screen, different things. And they're not, this isn't a literal, these are not photographic images of the Voyager spacecraft. These are just impressions of that, and of sort of industrial space imagery. So then there's this, which is another aluminum thing that is the difference between this and the Rumi is that this has all these black lines are silk screened. I made a bunch of these, right? And I didn't want, and I didn't feel I could just redraw this thing all that many times. And why do it? You know, if you don't have to. So I made a drawing, and Suzanne was a printmaking major in college, and she knew about all this stuff, and she said, why not get a silkscreen made? So we got a silkscreen made, and then she screened it. So all the black lines are in the same place on all the books. The painting is different on every one, but it gives me a place to know where to put the images, right? So it's just, and I'll show you in the archive, there's a page that has just the black lines on it without any painting. So this book has kind of a rhythm. It goes from these kinds of pages to these kinds of pages, back, forth, back, forth. So here's another one of these with the Whitman here. If I can get through this without dropping this on the floor, it'd be.
Doing beautifully.
So there's another one of those.
Is it heavy? Is it weigh a lot?
It's yeah. I don't know what it weighs. It's
a slippery surface too.
yeah, it is slippery. Yeah. This shape, this shape. Oh, I forgot to bring something. Anyway, I've been working with that shape for a long time, and I didn't really realize how long until I came across a piece of metal that I had just in my studio that's painted like that, and I meant to bring it, but I didn't. Anyway, there are a number of things with that shape in them that I'll show you in a few minutes. It's kind of like a wrench, kind of a shape, a spanner.
Is that incised, or is that what looks like wood? Is that?
This is it's just flat and it's paint.
Okay.
That's all it is, except for there's a piece of metal that's stuck onto this metal.
Okay.
So this and this, the two go like that.
Okay.
And this and this. So otherwise it's just, is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then it goes back again to another one of these. And I really love these kinds of industrial forms and shapes. And a lot of my work has that in them. And back and forth. This is kind of a docking, this sort of idea. It's again, it's nothing at all literal, but I just made it up. It's just stuff I make up. Come on. And then thank you. I like this page a lot too because it's different from the other ones. It's sort of simple and it kind of like fades out. This is the last of these.
And what is this board?
It's a dense. It's Bookbinders Board.
Okay.
It's actually it's kind of not so dense. I don't use it for binding, for boards because it's real light and it's not as dense as I want it to be for that. But for this, it was perfect because it's not so heavy. As heavy as it is, it's not as heavy as it could be.
Right.
And it holds up, it does what it's supposed to do. I mean, I can cut it and it'll not fall apart or something. But it's kind of like mat board, except it's not. Okay. Then the last is the colophon that tells who made it, how many we made, things like that. And then it closes. And that's it.
Don, would you read some of the Rumi just to give
Oh, sure.
a sense?
Yeah.
Is the Rumi only at the beginning?
Yeah, all the rest of the Mylar, those are the pages with the type on them are Mylar. Those are all Whitman. So this is the only Rumi. Do not care that you are humble or weak. Consider your aspiration. Whatever state you are in, always seek water, you with the dry lips. For your dry lips give evidence that at the end you will reach the fountain. This search is like a messenger calling out, crying out, dawn is imminent. This is a good one, I think. Whoever is searching, become his friend. Throw your head at his feet. For in the company of those who desire, you will know desire, and in the shadow of conquerors, you will become a conqueror. If an ant is searching for Solomon, do not look with contempt upon its search. All you have of wealth and skill, wasn't it only a thought and a search in the beginning? That's a great one. Yeah. So that's the book. And again, there were 10 regulars and 2 of these deluxes. Any questions?
How did Rumi get in there? I think you said initially. How did, I heard you about
You
it.
know, why did I
You
put
just
it in
said
there?
how did, yeah. How
How
was he doing that?
Yeah. I have a friend who is a translator of Rumi, and with the original Voyager book, the first one, I wanted to have some sort of other context other than, I didn't want it to be a space shot book,
Yeah.
right? Because to me it isn't. I'm not, that's not what it was about for me. And she, my friend, I knew that I didn't know much about Rumi actually, so I just called her and asked her to send me stuff. And there was a lot, man. He wrote a lot, or he said a lot, and people wrote. We kind of just pared it down, and then Vincent Fitzgerald is a publisher in New York, and he publishes Zare, the translator, publishes her translations, and they make books together. And so I had to kind of like go through him and everything. So it was kind of a process, but not so bad. But I wanted something that was like some big thought, you know, because that to me was what the whole space, the idea of exploring space and all that is, to me, isn't about really finding the little green guys on Mars or something. It's more about like unleashing our imagination, you know, like dare to wonder what's out there. And so I was looking for somebody who was talking about that. And then Whitman does too. A lot of The Leaves of Grass was not appropriate for this because he talks a lot about like dirt and worms and stuff, right? You know, I mean, he does. And I was looking for out there stuff, but there's enough of it, you know, to find. Anyone else? Yeah.
A technical question.
Uh-huh.
How do you adhere metal to metal?
There's a tape. There's this aluminum tape. Is that what you mean? Maybe.
Well, you said you had put pieces of metal on
Yeah,
metal.
yeah. This stuff is a tape that I think people use for hot for duct work where there's hot air involved.
Yeah.
So as opposed to what we know as duct tape. And I have a piece of metal that when I was in graduate school, I made a piece of sculpture, and this is a little thing is the only thing left of that piece of sculpture, but it's got some of this tape on it. And that was a long time ago. And that tape is it's all beat up and everything because I don't take care of it, but it's stuck. And that to me means a lot, right? And it didn't turn black and it didn't turn anything, and it really sticks, and it sticks for a long time. I don't know it was probably 30 years ago or something. So that's, conservators would consider that probably not a very long test, but it's what I got, so. Uh-huh.
How did you bind those pages, since they're all individual sheets?
I'll show you. I have pages that are not all put together, and I'll show you.
And the metal plates you started with were flat, but you didn't start with roll stock.
I did.
So
It was roll.
How did you stabilize the flatness of it?
Well, when you cut the bands on that roll stock, it goes boom, real fast, and it wants to be flat. And it still has a little bit of a curl to it, but it's fairly flexible, and some of the pages before I stuck them together to the board, they wanted to roll, but you can kind of just bend it a little bit. I mean, I just sort of, it doesn't have to be dead flat, because when you laminate something to something else in a press, it wants to be in that shape, so that's flat. So.
Wants to do that.
Anyone else? Yeah.
This is about the color on the metal plates.
Mhm.
You said you sprayed. Are you talking about an airbrush?
Exactly.
And
right.
if so, how did you get consistency for all the copies?
No, they're not. I mean, I make no even attempt to do that. I kind of like that about these books. They're not the same. I mean, the printing, the letterpress is kind of the same. I mean, as the same as it can be made, but the metal is sanded in a totally, I sanded it in a 50-foot roll with a sander like this, and there's no way that those pages are gonna be the same.
But you wanted consistency with the silk screen.
I wanted not to have to invent every single page. I really don't care. I mean, I rather enjoy the idea that they're not the same, you know, and it's boring to do the same thing all the time. And, you know, I have an assistant that helps me make these things, but for the most part, I mean, like the making of the pages, the painting and all that, I do all that, and it is boring to do the same thing all the time. So I start with something, you know, with the black lines, and then I just have some fun, you know, and make a nice page. And the next one will, and I've got a model here that's, so I look at it and right, okay, and then I just paint it, you know. I brought another book, if there's time at the end, to show you the first one of these kind of editions, but they're not really the same. I mean, I'd never made a multiple of anything until 2002. I'd always just made one book, and then that was it, and then I'd make a different book, right? Different title, stuff like that. But so I can show you this other book that I brought about the Brooklyn Bridge. There's no, I mean, I would get, when I was painting those pages on that book, I'd just get tired of it, you know. Even like well, let's do this, okay, I'll do this, and I'd get it down after 3 or 4 pages, like just about like I wanted it, and then the 4th one, it's like, oh, I did that already, so let's try this. And so they were different, you know. You put them next to each other, and you could really, really tell. Yeah.
So from concept to completion, what's the time frame for this edition?
This one?
Yeah.
Well, if you consider the first Voyager book as the beginning, which I don't think you meant.
No.
Right?
I'm really talking about 12 books.
Yeah.
Just
what do you
close.
think? A year and a half?
Thinking 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah. Okay. That sounds about right.
And, you know,
Does it?
during the thinking process, you know, you're working on something else, but you're thinking about what's next. So, you know, it's not as if you stop one thing.
Right.
You wake up and you
Yeah.
start another one.
You don't have to count the time in the shower.
On his bicycle.
That's pretty important time, though, sometimes.
Attorneys do that, but
Yeah, right. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it's not billable. Right.
Does each of the books have an accompanying archives,
No,
boxed archives? Is
no,
that just the
just
two
2 of them.
editions?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah,
So it's not. a kind of
Anyone else?
Printmakers that have that?
Let's look at the order.
Okay.
yeah. Because he talked about consistency of the silk screen, so it was confusing.
Okay. So this
heavy.
is just this is a piece of metal, and I just wrote on it with a pen or pencil or something. 3 in Search of the Universe archive. And there are 5 kind of portfolios here. This one says sketches. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to just put this over here. So, and I've kind of forgotten what's in these things. I mean, which one has what in it. But so this is one of the, one of the pages that has some of the stuff behind it, but not much. And then this is what I was telling you about before. This is the metal before it got sprayed, and no color on it. So it just shows me where I'm supposed to paint, basically, you know. this is a photocopy of something that was on newsprint, and already it's almost untouchable. So I photocopied it on decent paper. This is just the, the map of the book, how it's going to go. And in fact, it didn't go this way. I changed it slightly, but mostly it's there. I mean, title page, blank, blank, Rumi, and then a metal page spread, and then one with the Whitman, back and forth, back and forth. But so I took away this one, and I took away this one, and I started with that. Otherwise, it's the same. So, and here's that little spanner idea I was telling you about. Can you all see?
Mm-hmm.
This is how I work. I mean, this is just how I do it. I'm not a fine draftsman or anything. They're just sketchy little stupid things. I mean, there's to somebody who can really draw. If I was showing it to somebody who could really draw, it's kind of embarrassing. I mean, they're just like, if they take more than about 15 seconds, it's too long. Just get it out there, see what you got, and keep going and keep going. That was. So none of these things really were used, I don't think.
They're part of the process.
But it's part of the process, right? And then these, I don't know what these are. So, they kind of show up in there in the books. I mean, parts of them do, right? Yeah, okay, so that's that. And this is model drawings and sketches. So here's one of the shapes, but on the back, this is how I did it. So this is just like figuring out how the damn thing is going to go together, right? And so I just have stuff. I mean, that's how I work. And it's just, I've got some old tape that they do. Film strip tape, and it's all, and I just thought, well, that might be cool. So I put marks on it and try it out. That's what this is too.
Could you go back a page so I can see I missed that. Okay, cool. Nice.
The secret's revealed.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really pretty low-tech kind of deal. These things are the sketches that are manifest in that book. But the process is what I think is important, is the reason I kept this stuff. And I just would do something, and then I knew that I was going to have an archive. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I just was going to have it. So I had a box. Unlike usually what I do is I just throw it in a drawer, or it gets thrown away, and Suzanne has to come in and say, "This is important, keep this." But in this case, I had a box. I just kept everything went in the box. And then when it was all over, we went through it and tried to find out stuff that was the most interesting. So, and this is the real drawing. It's got little trials of, there's holes in here from a compass that make these things, I think. And there's erasures and all kinds of stuff. And this is a page spread here that was not used. So I had it all ready to go, but decided not to use it. And Cynthia asked me why I didn't, why was this chosen not to be, or why was this unchosen? And I really don't remember, but when you have all of these drawings all lined up, sometimes something just doesn't fit.
Well, it's
I
called
mean-
an outtake. And
Right.
they're very, very valuable.
Yeah, they could be, right, yeah. So it's not that it wasn't good enough, it just, given everything else, didn't make the cut. Printer's notes, this is, you'll like this. This is Jessica Springs. I have a few proofs that she made, and this is, one of them's upside, they're upside down from each other, but this is the title page, and she marks that it should go down an inch, and this should go down a quarter of an inch, and like that. And this one is kind of cool. This she cut. This was here, and she with the scissors, and it says go down a quarter of an inch, and I didn't move it down a quarter of an inch, but it's just to show what she had in mind. And then this is the title page without the 3. Jessica sent me a proof or a PDF of the title page and a 3 on it, big 3, if you remember this big 3. And Suzanne is a type person, and a letter form person, and I'm not. And I thought, oh, this is great, And Suzanne said, God, that 3 is terrible. So she redesigned the 3, so we have that. So. Okay.
We're not putting up with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it becomes an illustration.
This is Material Explorations. So this is just a couple of drawings about the binding. Come on, baby. And this is a little model that I made with recessed areas, which is the way the binding ends up. It's not in this form, but there are these metal pieces in recesses. And these are just experiments to see about how to make marks on the metal underneath the pages with the holes in them. So, in other words, well, I've got a better example, but the black pages with the holes in them are backed by the metal pages with the paintings on them, right? But the back of that metal page has stuff on it that you see through the hole. So I wanted to figure out how I can make marks, what's going to work. This doesn't work because of this, right? It offsets, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. You just try, try and figure it out. This is a visually textured page, but it's pretty flat. And so I didn't want that. I wanted real texture. So that's what this is. This is a gel stuff with some grit in it, pumice, that I then painted over with black paint, with first some color, let that dry, then the black gets almost scraped all off, and that's the way it ended up. But you don't know until you do these things, you know? So. All right, this one, how does this go? Yeah, it goes, is that right? Yeah. So this is the back of, like this would have been silkscreen and painted. But in here, you've got that. So these aren't tests. This is more like the prototype. So the way that gets made is by putting some things on here and some things on here.
How did you get that crinkle? That
Oh, there's this funny little tool, I think it's a toy, I'm not sure. But you can put paper through this thing, you crank it. It's like a bunch of gears. And then you stick so you put the tape, I shouldn't tell you all this. You put this tape through it, and it makes it all like corrugated cardboard. And then you stick it down, and then you do that to it, and it flattens it out, and it makes this sort of thing. And this is just window screen. But we had to cut out little places, because this has dimension. And so I don't want to bump there, you know. So underneath here, there's a little, with a knife, you cut around there and peel away a little bit of the board. And it was all, the only thing that, the difference between this, as you see it right now, and the way we used it as a prototype, as a model for the pages, is it all had blue tape instead of this nice Japanese, you know. So now it's archival and stuff. This got left on there for some reason, I don't know why, and I thought, that's good. We should, and if it falls off someday, then it does. But
Don, I have to say that I think the book is so magnificent, but for me, the thing that makes it most special is having the archive, because it's all a journey. It's not the discovery, you know, which is, for me, the book is, but it's the journey. And this allows us to participate in that.
yeah, I like it too. I mean,
That's cool.
yeah. Yeah. So, and there are notes on here that says, new black without matte medium scraped. So, you know, it's just because I tried so many different ways to get what I wanted to get, and you have to sort of, I'm not very good at it, so it says new black. Well, how many new blacks were there? I don't know. So that's the archive. So in about 2000, maybe 2001, we lived in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was looking for a way. I make one-off bindings like these, you know. Some of these I actually made, but they're one of a kind. They're printed books that somebody else prints and makes, and then I get commissioned or not to make a binding on these things. And I make it, and it gets sold, hopefully, and I get money, and I get to make the next one. And it's a very kind of a process. And at some point, that wasn't working for me. My work kept getting more and more complicated, visually and technically. And there was a price, it all had to do with this boring economic business, but I couldn't charge enough money to make it worth, nobody'd pay it. And I didn't want to like dummy down my work. So anyway, I decided to make an edition so I could have one concept and one big idea, which would take a lot more time to develop and everything than the one-off bindings, but I could make a bunch of them, and then I could have one to show people. So, and I could have more than one to sell, and all of that. And so I started this, and Suzanne talked me out of bagging the whole thing and going to graduate school, back to graduate school, and I was going to be an English professor. And she said, "Snap out of it! Don't just go back to your
really big money in that.
just go back to your studio, go to work, and shut up." So I made this edition. It was a huge edition. There are 50 of these. 50 for sale, and some artist proofs and stuff. And we've all heard that writers should write what they know, or at least what they like. And I've always been sort of in love with the Brooklyn Bridge, just as an object, it's a beautiful thing. And so that's a good subject, as good as any. So I made this book about the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's all metal. All the pages are metal. There's a leather spine, but let's see if it's right side up. Yeah. So here's the title page, Brooklyn Bridge, a love song. And we have a dealer that we have known forever, and Priscilla. And so I had this idea to make this book, and so I run things. She has a really good sense of things, and I really value her opinion. So I said, "Priscilla, I want to make this book, about the Brooklyn Bridge," and I didn't know it was going to be metal yet, but make an edition and blah blah. And she said, "What's the text?" I said, "No, man, there's no text. It's just going to be this visual book. It's going to be great, right?" Well, what's the text? And we go back and forth for a while like that. And then she said, "Don, listen," she said, "these are books, right? You want me to sell these books to libraries, right? Those guys need words." So, all right. So it has a text, and she had suggestions, and I looked at the suggestions of what kind of text to have, and I didn't like any of it. So I decided to write a poem for it. I had before I was an art school person, I wrote poetry and stuff. So I thought, I can do this. I don't know how successful it was, but I'll read it to you. It's short. Brooklyn Bridge. The bridge spans Brooklyn to Manhattan, ancient to modern, heavy mass to lacy space, stone to steel. The bridge moves, vertical to horizontal to diagonal, joined in a dizzying dance by sweeping lines, inspired by natural grace. The bridge defines, bold and practical, a vital invention, an icon for the nation built by dreamers. The bridge endures. She's seen it all. Peace and war, plenty and need, vice and honor, the sublime and the horrific. She stands watch and does not yield. The gracious lady stands in the river and does not yield. So that was written just after 9/11. And they were, there was talk of other targets, right? If you remember that, but besides the obvious ones, the ones that already got hit, and the Brooklyn Bridge was one of them, and I thought, if those bastards bomb my bridge before I get this book done. Anyway, so this is now the visual book. Now this is what I wanted to do before Priscilla got involved. So it's a series of abstract studies, kind of visual studies, and they have. I need to do this so that this thing doesn't eat that thing. Come on, baby. It's not like paper, you know. And then, like the other book, it has a rhythm. So there are these material studies, and then a portrait. And this is Spring Morning. And this is the most abstract of them all. And then another material thing. And another portrait. So you can see how, you know, I mean, this was 2002 I finished this edition. And I've made some other materially oriented, or at least produced that way, books since then. But the metal, you know, it's been in my life for a while.
What is the ink again on the metal? Did you say polymer?
No, this this one, there is no ink except on the title page and the poem, right? That's silkscreen.
Okay.
And I didn't know Jessica then, or any other printer that would, you know, I didn't think you could even print on the stuff. So I found this is Cleveland, we lived in Cleveland, right? And so I found this guy, this shop that would, that did things like, they did silk screening on those frames around the license plates, stuff like that. So I brought him this job. And I said, what do you think? You think you guys can do it? Oh yeah, sure. And they did it. With a few reservations, but they did do it. But all the stuff that you see here is all paint and pencil marks and like that. They're not. There's no printing. The silkscreen, the stuff that looks like printing. Yeah, this is winter morning. So it just goes back and forth between the abstract, these things, and these things. This, I forgot what I called that. This looks, I guess that was, this one looks a little less hot, but I think that I've called it Dog Day Afternoon. But it doesn't look that hot to me from here. And then this one is the Bridge at Night.
How did you get that effect with a mask? Did you mask some of that?
Yeah, I had I made a stencil that's that shape, and that's the same.
That's the tower.
That's as all the rest of them.
Yeah.
So if you look at that negative shape, and that it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. But I put the mask down. So instead of having like the silk screening that Suzanne did on that book to give me the place to paint, I had this thing was on a just flopped. I put the page down there, put this thing on it, just kind of flopped in the same place every time, and then I could paint however I did it. And I just basically would spray some, like with this, I'd probably spray some black and then pick the thing up, the mask away, and then just paint. So they're all different, you know. And these, like there's brush strokes here, and all of that is different in each, you know, copy. And there were a lot of these, man. There was 50 books, 60 books, and 50 for sale. And then that's the colophon. There you go. There's you see that white tape? Well, that white tape actually just covers up a piece of cotton fabric. So, and it's put on there because, like that book doesn't have this, the Japanese paper on it, because this gets glued to that and you don't see it. This was going to be open, and so we wanted to kind of like dress it up a little bit. But there's a piece of cotton that there's a little groove. This is the board. And there's a little, this is thinner right here than here. So we pulled away a little bit of the board and then glued the cotton in there. And the cotton's about this long, this wide. And then it folds in half and folds in half. And that's, so do you see up in here, that black? That's, the cotton goes out from the page. So the cotton is glued into the page, in the sandwich. And it goes out and folds over again. And then you sew through that second fold, just like you would sew any paper book. But it's the cotton provides the hinge. So it's actually pretty easy on the binding. You see, the binding, this part doesn't have to do much down here, not a lot. But the pages, right up in here is where the flex is. Well, I didn't make that up, but I used it.
So those hinges on that archive piece are just sewn together on the sewing machine?
Right.
It's not sewn like that to
But
go into the book?
But
it's-
the tabs of fabric
Yeah.
are there. They're just kind of folded up because this is, it didn't have to do what this has to do. So, and you know, these books are, when you make a book like this, you there's an assumption that it's going to be taken care of, sort of, at least, right? So in other words, you know, Cynthia's not going to like throw it in her backpack and go cross-country skiing.
I think you could use that as a sled, though.
Right, right. Yeah, there's wax on it and everything. Yeah. So it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty, it's a structure that's made, that's designed to do exactly what this does, just to make a flexible binding out of inflexible materials. Magic.
Is there a name for that?
Yeah, I only know it's called montage sur anglais, which is a French term which I think means, anglais are the strips, and montage is to glue, to mount. So I've also heard people say mounted on guard strips, a book mounted on stubs. That stubs kind of sounds a little crude to me. So montage sur anglais is what I prefer. But yeah, and photo albums, sometimes 19th century photo albums you see have they're made much like this, right? They're cutouts and for the photograph, and there's a cloth hinge or Japanese paper hinge. So, anyone else? Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. This is fun.